Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Jordan Arell, and here's another daily video on circumcision. So today, I am very happy that a good friend of mine from college is going to have a baby boy this Christmas. And she's of course going to leave him intact. Why would she mutilate his genitals? That is insanity. And her and the father are very in agreement. Of course, they would not cut his dick off, which is great. However, so I've been talking to her more about it. She doesn't know a lot about it. She just knows intuitively. Why would she, do that? The father is intact, and so it's like it's an act of violence, and very intuitively she understands it's not her right to do that to him. But one thing, she said was, if he gets older and he wants to do it himself, I'll let him do it. Of course, I'll give him that right to change his body if he wants to. And I understand that, when a kid is 18, if he has all of the information he can possibly get on this, then he should be able to make that choice for himself, of course. However, before he's that age, when his brain isn't all the way developed yet, and isn't, necessarily at the point where he can make the choice of whether or not to amputate a very important part of his genitals, I would suggest he does need to wait until that age, and to not give consent for a doctor to do that to him before then. I think that is very important. And furthermore, as a parent, I think we have a really important responsibility to our children to teach them, all the lessons of life that are important. And if you raise him to have these values naturally, then it's very likely that he will come to these conclusions on his own without you explicitly needing to explain all of them. However, let me go into them in a little bit of detail here, just to kind of show what I think these important values are that will lead him to understand why it's good that he has his whole dick. So the first thing is, first of all, when he's a child, when he's like a young child, you can't really explain all of this to him in detail. You can start to instill these values, but really, until he's at least maybe age 10 or so, you can say, if he comes to you and says, "Mom and Dad, why is my penis not like some of the other boys?" Even though it's decreasing, and there's probably just as many intact boys today as there are circumcised, but he's maybe curious about this, and even upset about it, especially if he gets teased. And you can, very gently explain to him, actually, those boys had part of their penis cut off when they were a baby, and it's something that was very painful for them. And they don't really know anything about it, but it's actually a lot of people don't know about it, but that part of your penis is there for a reason, and it's very important, and I'll tell you more about it when you get older. But it's very lucky that you still have that part of your penis, because it's there for good reasons. You can even encourage him to explore with it or play with it, or look more closely at it, and realize that he still has all the other parts of their penis, and he can also make that choice for himself if he wants to. When he gets older, he can cut that part off, but the other boys can't bring that part back. You can just explain that to him. You have this extra part there, and you get to keep it if you want to. When you get older, it will. There's very good reasons for it to be there, I promise, and I'll explain those when you get older. So when he's old enough, though, if he's old enough to understand, you can start to teach him about sexuality, about sexual pleasure. You can explain to him sexual pleasure is a very wonderful thing that humans get to experience when we make babies. We feel really good when we do this act of sex, and part of the reason it feels so good is because of the foreskin, because there's all these nerve endings there, and because it folds in and out of itself. It's extremely pleasurable. It makes it so you don't need lubrication, because a lot of circumcised guys need to use something to make it moist and wet, because and slippery, because the foreskin doesn't go up and down, and the penis can't go in and out of itself inside the vagina, and you can't masturbate without lubrication. And so it's really useful for that. It feels really good because it has actually most of the nerve endings in the penis. You can actually encourage him at the very tip of the foreskin. Underneath the foreskin, there's the ridge band and there's the frenulum right underneath the head. And those two parts, you can lightly tap them or play with them, and you can actually orgasm just from playing with those parts. And you can tell him, research more about it, learn more about it. I would say, see if you can introduce him to some more high-minded erotica. I'm sure he'll watch porn at some point. So try to steer him in the direction of, explain to him that porn has value, but you really need to watch porn that shows loving acts, that shows the meaningfulness of sex and beauty of it, and that shows very clearly also why the foreskin is so valuable, as there's a lot of really great foreskin porn. Have them watch that. I've talked to intact men who say they watch that as part of their education to really help them with their self-esteem, and see that women enjoy it, that men enjoy it, that the individual who has it really enjoys it, and it's really, really valuable for a lot of reasons. There's so much you can do with it. It's so much fun. It's there for your pleasure. You can also explain, it's it's naturally there for a reason. It actually evolved to be there over billions of years, and all mammals have a foreskin. Nature evolved for us to be able to enjoy sex so that we could continue to reproduce, and so that's why it's there. It's part of the enjoyment of sex. There's so many. You can have him look up the functions of the foreskin, or you can explain the 16 plus functions of the foreskin to him. There's so many reasons it's there. You can even teach him that it's sacred, if that's something you believe, like I do, that sex is extremely sacred and a very spiritual experience, and it's a very, very beautiful thing, and that can be very, very interrupted by circumcision and not having that important part of your penis there. So another thing you can teach him when he's in the age of puberty, by the way, is to wash his foreskin. Some people say it's dirty, it's gross, and you can debunk those myths for him. You say, no, actually it's not gross, son. You just pull your foreskin back and wash it off with water for a few seconds in the shower every day, and it's clean. Teach your daughter the same thing. Wash it out with water a little bit and get the smegma out, because it does start to smell a little bit with both genders if you don't clean it. So teach him hygiene, teach him why that's important, and it's a very important lesson. Another thing to teach in this is just simply self-esteem, simply loving yourself, simply appreciating all of yourself for who you are, not trying to change it to make other people happy, because if he's constantly trying to change himself to make others happy, he will never be happy with himself. This is extremely important in all areas of life, including his sexuality, to learn to appreciate himself, again, to experiment with his own body, and to learn to love it, to learn to appreciate it. Also, he should understand, by the way, the foreskin doesn't often retract until puberty. It may not be retractable for him yet, but you can let him know. It will retract at some point. Nobody should ever try to retract his foreskin, except the boy himself, if he feels so inclined. But it's okay if it doesn't retract, if the foreskin doesn't pull back from the head of the penis. It doesn't have to do that, sometimes till the late teens or early 20s. And so that's not a problem at all. Even if it never retracts, it's actually not a problem. It still feels a billion times better. Trust me, I've talked to guys who got circumcised because they said, my foreskin doesn't retract. That's natural. It's at birth, it's fused to the head with the same thing that holds your nails on. So if you rip his foreskin off of the glands, off the head of the penis, that's the same as ripping your fingernails off, except it's not a fingernail. It's the most sensitive skin on a guy's body. So don't rip his foreskin off of his glands ever, but you can let him know that retracts when he gets older. Usually, sometimes it doesn't, but if it does, then just, again, wash it every day. That's all I really need to know. And then loving himself, of course. And if other kids do make fun of him, this is a big lesson in life that's actually really, really important, and I definitely want to try to encapsulate it if I can. It's something you have to teach him throughout life, is how to deal with conflict. But when someone is judging him or looking down on him. You have to really realize that that person's hurting probably in ways that he can't see, that you're not aware of. And that's why someone's angry, that's why someone's attacking, that's why someone's being rude or aggressive, is because they're hurting themselves. Otherwise, they have no reason to attack like that. And so you really want to have compassion for them. And of course, a guy who's circumcised, who has part of his dick cut off, whether he's aware of it or not, this is a really bad thing that's happened to him, and it may make him feel better to try to put someone else down. He may not be aware of the harm of it. He may be very ignorant, as his parents were ignorant, and that's why they cut it off. They just didn't understand. So you can explain that to your son, that he probably doesn't know as much about the foreskin as he now does, because you taught him, and his parents didn't know that, and he's been very badly hurt by this, whether or not he knows it. It's something that was extremely painful for him as a baby, and now he's missing out on a lot of the sexual pleasure that your son gets to keep, that your son is really, really blessed to have a parent like you who loves him so much and is able to protect him from this horrible, horrible sex crime. So it's important to have compassion for those, and be gentle with them. You can defend yourself and say any of the reasons that I just said, and say, actually, it's there for a reason, and I'm really proud to have my foreskin, and I'm sorry that you don't. I'm sorry that you're missing part of your penis, and really speak up for himself. Have compassion, try to have understanding, try to communicate, teach him those communication skills, and teach him to really also stand up for this issue, because it's so important that people learn to speak up about this. If we don't speak up about this issue, it will never change. And so teach your son how to say, I actually believe kids should be able to choose, to circumcise themselves if they want to, but I would never want to, because it has a lot of nerve endings. It feels really, really good. It has a lot of uses. It's there for a lot of reasons. It protects the head of the penis, keeps it moist, and keeps it from drying out and developing a callus. It keeps it much more sensitive. It serves a lot of functions during sex. It means I don't have to have lube to masturbate. It feels really, really good when I masturbate with the foreskin. There's so many reasons that it's really, really important that we evolve to have this. And, say, well, son, you can just explain any of those reasons. What's most important to you? Why do you think it's really great that you have this? Because it is great. And then just explain that to, if the kid is even open, there's a lot of further conflict resolution skills that you can get into, and I'd certainly encourage you to, really teach your kid a lot of communication skills throughout his life, because it's so important. But the main thing is, be able to speak up for this, say, I think we should actually keep our babies intact, and there's a lot of reasons it's there. Look it up for yourself if you don't believe me. I'm sorry this happened to you, but I really love my body the way it is, and it sucks to be you. If they're really not, complying, you can just fuck off, piece of shit. Whatever you need to say. But I think that about covers it for today, guys. So important to have this conversation with your son whenever it comes up, or before that too. If he notices his penis is different from his dad's, or if and he's doesn't understand why, or you can just explain it to him. If you're doing more activism around this, if it comes up for any reason, you can explain all these details. I actually think sex education at an even earlier age isn't a bad thing at all, and just educate him little pieces here and there from as soon as he's a little baby kid. Just answer whatever questions he has with honesty, simplicity, directness, in the way that he can understand and absorb. And then kids are curious, and they're smart. They'll figure it out for themselves, really, if you give them the very basic understanding and the ability to research and learn and grow and love and be good people of the world. Parenting is the most important thing in the world. I really, really believe that. So let's all do our best to raise kids who are wonderful in every way. That's it for today, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.